It's the Michael Patrick Leahy Show, broadcasting live from downtown Nashville. And now, here's Michael Patrick Leahy.
And we welcome to our newsmaker line right now our very good friend, Washington political editor for Breitbart News, my former boss, all-around great guy, one of the best reporters in the country, Matt Boyle. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Mike. How's it going, sir?
Well, Matt, I've been thinking about you and I have been covering elections since, I think, maybe 2008. So this is 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020, 2024. That's 5 presidential elections that we've covered. Matt, it seems to me this has got a very different feel these last 8 days, as witnessed the big Trump rally in Madison Square Garden yesterday. Your thoughts on that, Matt Boyle?
Yeah, well, look, I don't think we've ever seen a Republican candidate with this firm of a lead in the polls, both national polls and state polls in the battleground states, as what we're seeing out of Trump right now. So, I mean, it's just incredible. Donald Trump has all the energy. Kamala Harris is like a flat tire, slowly deflating, right? Like, and so, like, her campaign.
Is that Matt? Is that the first time you've used that phrase? Because it's a really great one.
I think I've used it a few other places.
Gosh.
But that being said, that's the best analogy I could come up with, right? It's like, yeah, you could drive on it a little bit, right? But like eventually you're gonna have to pull over and change the tire because it's just the car's gonna crash, right? Like, and so it's slowly but surely deflating, right? Like, and so. Look, I've talked to Democrats, I've talked to Republicans. Republicans are over the moon right now. They think they've got all the energy. We see the early vote numbers out there across the country. Republicans are, for the first time ever, leading in North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada in the early voting. We've never seen that before, right? Like, and so we're seeing black voter turnout is down in Georgia and in Milwaukee. We're seeing, I mean, all the signs are pointing in a great direction for Donald Trump and a terrible direction for Kamala Harris, which is why the Democrats are going through what I call the stages of grief, right? Like, some of them are still in denial. Some of them have moved on to anger. Some, like Michelle Obama this weekend, she's out there bargaining with people, right? Like saying, look, girls, tell your guy that, you're going to withhold on him if he doesn't vote for Kamala, and, trying to make deals with people, right? Like, some have even moved on to depression. None of them have yet moved on to acceptance, okay? But the Democrats are going through the stages of grief right now, and they're all in various stages of them. I have talked to some Democrats privately who have already accepted this, right? Like, they know that Donald Trump's going to win the election, and they're starting to come to terms with it, right? Like, I had a long call last night with a very senior Democrat strategist, and at first he was saying he's going to leave the country, and then now he's like, okay, now we got to pick up the pieces and figure out what do we do after this. But the point is that Kamala Harris's campaign is in total free fall and collapse. They're desperately trying to push this whole Nazi, Hitler, authoritarian dictator narrative in the home stretch, right? She's going to do this big speech tomorrow on the National Mall at the Ellipses at the White House, but there's nothing left there, right? There's no energy left on the Kamala side. All the energy is with Trump. The question now for Trump is can he close the deal, and does he convert all these people into votes, right? Does he convert all this energy into votes? And it's just a purely mechanical thing at this point. Mm-hmm. Trump has won the national debate. He's won the energy fight. He's won this campaign. The question is now, can he execute, and does the ground game carry him across the finish line? And I think it will.
Yeah. Run through the tape the last 8 days, and Trump is, he's busy. He's got a terrific schedule. I mean, you've interviewed him many times as he's traveling. Mm-hmm. Just to kind of describe the guy's level of energy at the age of 78.
It's unbelievable. I'm 37. I couldn't do it. It's unbelievable, right? Like, I mean, every time you turn around. Last time I talked to him was last weekend, right? So not this past weekend, but the weekend before on Saturday afternoon. And when I talked to him, it was right before. So he had just wrapped the Tello rally, right? We were doing a radio interview, and he's doing the interview with us on his way to the in the motorcade. And then he says during the interview, right? It's amazing, right? You can go hear the whole thing if you go on Breitbart and go listen to it. He literally says during the interview, you wouldn't know this. He walks up the stairs of his plane while he's on the phone with us, talking to us about national policy and what he's going to do if he wins and the state of the race and so on and so forth. And then he's about to take off and go to Pennsylvania. And this was like the day before he did the big McDonald's thing. And remember, when he did the McDonald's thing, after that, he did a town hall event. Then he went to the Steelers game. Right, like in that day when I was talking to him, he did a rally that night. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Every time you turn around, Donald Trump's somewhere else, right? Like, and he was in Madison Square Garden last night. He's got a packed schedule this week. He's supposedly got events coming up in, the traditional battlegrounds. I think he's got an event in North Carolina on Wednesday. He has, but he also is, and he's going to be hitting Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin aggressively. But he's also going to be going to New Mexico in Virginia, it appears, right? Like, so I believe
widening the map, right?
Yeah, widening the map. And by the way, there's a poll out this morning that has him with a very narrow lead in New Hampshire. I think it would be smart for him to go there too if he can fit it in.
So, so at the rally, I'm watching the rally at Madison Square Garden. It just seemed to be electric. Our friend Mike Benz was there and said it's like nothing he's ever seen. What I liked about Elon Musk is he talked about positive energy, America, a level of confidence in America getting things done. That positive energy was obvious everywhere. You look at what the regime media is doing this morning. Oh, my goodness. They're about to jump off a cliff.
It's like I don't see how they can write the stories they're writing. I watched the whole rally or most of it on TV. I'll tell you, it's totally divorced from reality what we're seeing in the coverage this morning, right? Like, and I think that it just goes to show you just how weak the establishment media is. In fact, Axios this morning, the heart of the establishment media in Washington, D.C., they came out with a big multi-part series piece about how the news media has diminished itself over the course of this election. Their influence, they're admitting their own influence has waned more than ever this election. And this is yet another example of that, right? Like the establishment media is the least powerful they've ever been. And that's probably a good thing for the country, frankly. But the fact is that they did it to themselves by behaving like jackals and hyenas, right? Like, and so, what do they expect, right? Like, if they're going to continually lie about Donald Trump and his supporters to their audiences, I mean, look, who are you going to believe? Them or your lying eyes, right?
Good point.
Go watch the rally yourself and see what happened. Do take Kamala's advice. Go watch the rally yourself and see what see if you think it was some Nazi rally. It wasn't.
Matt,
obviously wasn't.
Here's a breaking story, which fits in the category. Yeah, of course you're doing this. The Philadelphia District Attorney is suing Elon Musk over this $1 million giveaway to swing state voters days after the Justice Department issued a warning. It's a civil lawsuit. I've talked to various experts on our side. Yeah, totally legal to be done. We're going to see this and more lawfare, I think, over the next 8 days and after the election night. Your thoughts on that, Matt Boyle?
Yeah, well, of course that's all they've got, right? Like, you're going to keep seeing them do it. Obviously, Jack Smith dumped the notebook out on Donald Trump in the lead up to it. Hopefully, Steve Bannon, our old boss, is out tomorrow. I talked to him over the weekend over email from prison, and he's excited to get out. And I think he's going to be very active. But the whole point is that Steve Bannon spent 4 months in federal prison because of the fact that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have weaponized government against conservatives, right? Like, there was no reason for him to be in prison.
None whatsoever.
None whatsoever. Like, and by the way, they could have, even after everything that happened, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris could have commuted his sentence and not ever.
They chose not to. In fact,
right?
He's apparently going to be on War Room like for 4 hours tomorrow. I have my request in for an exclusive interview tomorrow, and I think you probably do as well, Matt. So we'll see. And good luck to Steve coming out. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Yep. All right. Thank you, sir.
All right. We'll have more with John McLaughlin, pollster to Donald Trump, after this.
Welcome back to the Michael Patrick Leahy Show. Now, here's Michael Patrick Leahy.
And welcome back to the Michael Patrick Leahy Show. We're joined on our Newsmaker line right now by our very good friend, the best pollster in the country, in my view, John McLaughlin. Good morning, John.
Well, if President Trump wins again, that description will hold. But I got 8 days to go. We've got to get out the vote. But it's flattering. But if you're a pollster, you're only as good as the candidates you work for. So.
I heard you earlier today on the John Fredericks radio network and talking to John, and you said, let's watch out for the ghost of Mitt Romney. Well, that's my description of what you said. But apparently, Mitt Romney is still with us, except I don't know if he's really with us. When you run for president and you lose, I think it shatters you. And it certainly shattered Mitt Romney. But my point is that explain why 8 days before the 2012 election, there was optimism that Romney might win.
Well, similar to where we are right now with President Trump. We've never experienced this before. We're used to, like Hillary Clinton was ahead of us by 5 or 6 points in the national polls at this point. The polls were kind of biased against us. We were losing every battleground state. They were saying it was a Hillary lock. And even on election day, 538 gave her a 71% chance of winning. The exit polls came out. They said she's won. We're like, no, count the votes. And by the grace of God, out of 139 million votes, President Trump won with 44,000 in Pennsylvania, 22,000 in Wisconsin, and 10,000 in Michigan. And then in 2020, they kept on saying, oh, Biden's ahead by 10 points at this point in time, like a week out, and in the national polls, and he was winning every battleground state, and it was a Biden blue wave. We couldn't win. And unfortunately, by 44,000 votes, 12,000 in Arizona and Georgia, and 20,000 in Wisconsin, we had lost the votes we'd lost those votes in those states and lost the electoral vote. So right now, we're tied in the national vote, which is good for us with the Electoral College, because when you go to the battleground states, President Trump's ahead in each of those states, but it's like some under a percentage point and some
margin of error type stuff.
So we're seeing that, but people are actually voting now. So you've got, like, most of the voters, by the end of today, most of the voters in Georgia will have voted. But we still got to it's very close. We still got to keep getting our vote out. The early vote's going very well in Nevada. It's going well in Arizona. It's going well in Georgia and North Carolina. But we're not done yet.
Yeah.
And the 3 toss-up states in the Rust Belts are very close, too. And going back to Romney, when Hurricane Sandy hit, they thought it was tactical. It was all about the battleground states. And people polled and had Romney ahead by a point or two in the national polling. And he decided to skip over Americans who were affected by Hurricane Sandy, and instead Obama comes in, hugs Chris Christie.
Yeah, I remember that.
Helps people. And on Sunday and Monday, Obama went ahead in the national polls, and he won by 4%. And
the point on all this, John, is how fluid this can be in the last 8 days of a campaign. We're talking about 2012. Yep. I'll tell you my personal story in 2012. So I had just started with Breitbart. I'd been maybe 6 months with Breitbart. And my assignment was to go up to Boston and cover the Romney headquarters. And there was a level of optimism. On Election Day, I flew out the previous day, and I was in Roanoke, Virginia, because we had a little get-out-the-vote effort. And it was a debacle. I mean, there was no get out the vote for Romney. As I'm getting on the plane going up to Boston from Roanoke that night, I just had a feeling like, well, the polls are great, but the momentum doesn't feel very good. And boy, talk about being in a campaign headquarters when you're losing. It was dead and dull in Boston that night for Romney. And it doesn't feel like that right now, though, John.
No, the Romney campaign had an Irish wake in Boston that night. And
boy, that's exactly right.
Except the body was alive. And they were expecting, I didn't work for them. I'd worked for George W. with a lot of them, and I was telling them, you guys got to come into Nassau and Suffolk, County, Staten Island, or New Jersey, and he's got to show he cares. And, they just fell into Obama's trap that it was a rich guy didn't care about the average person. Totally the opposite with Donald Trump. Yesterday at Madison Square Garden, if you watched the rally, if you watched it online or Fox News or Newsmax, or if you listened to it, you heard a person who was likable. The guy who waited on people at McDonald's, unlike Kamala Harris, who doesn't tell the truth. You saw people connect with him. He loves blue-collar workers. He loves the average Americans. He wants to cut our taxes. He wants to go back to, he says, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?
That was his opening line, and it was a good one.
And that's the contrast we want to have in the final week as people are voting. Is like, do you want to have low inflation, or do you want to have high inflation, open borders, illegal immigration, rising crime, endless wars that they can't stop? Do you want to go back to peace and prosperity? And Donald Trump cares about those things, and he cares about this country, and people saw a very likable, self-effacing person who's determined to win to help this country. And that's our closing argument. Our closing argument is, oh, you're Nazis and you're fascists, and
yeah, really, it's ludicrous. Yeah. But that closing argument, John, this morning on MSNBC, that's all they're talking about. Mika, they had Susan Rice. They trotted her out there, lying through her teeth. John, I'm told that you actually were at the rally, Madison Square Garden, yesterday. Is that right?
Yes, I was there.
Tell us about it.
I was, well, it was really crowded, and it's like they had to send somebody out to get me. People, like, if you know New York and Manhattan, okay, it's Deep Blue Manhattan, but it's the media capital of the world. And Madison Square Garden is the most famous arena in New York City. I mean, it was like Willis Reed coming out to win for the Knicks. Well, there was Donald Trump. They had lines going on for blocks, and they couldn't get in all the people that they wanted to have in, and tens of thousands of people wait outside to watch. And these are New Yorkers, so it's a diverse crowd. You got people there who are Hispanic and African American, and people who are Democrats who want Donald Trump to win because, when you talk about a place that's been badly affected by the open border policies, New York is suffering now. The crime is 75% of the arrests made in Manhattan now are illegal immigrants, which is
75%.
Yeah.
Wow.
You have gangs. You have this Trinidad Aragua gang, which is, literally they've killed people around the country. And Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have not apologized for any of this. They've not contacted any of the victims' families. They knew they were letting in murderers and rapists and drug dealers. And, in New York City, it's cost the taxpayers billions because they're putting them up in nice hotels.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy.
Food,
I mean, if I go to New York City on business, I got to pay for my hotel, right?
Yeah.
But if I were to claim I were an illegal alien, there'd be a place for me in a very nice hotel. John, so they let you in. Where did you stay during the rally? Were you like up front with the big team, or where were you?
I walked around and saw a lot of elected officials I knew, and then I went upstairs to the Newsmax booth and hung around for a couple hours while my clients were being interviewed. Then I went back down to the. It was like I was in a section, not the VIP section that was right on the floor, but
the almost VIP section.
Yeah, well, yeah, there was a campaign worker section, and President Trump was great, but I got to see history when he was making his speech. But you had so many great speakers. I mean, besides having his family there and Don Jr. and Eric and Lara, you had RFK. Here he is, RFK Jr., the son of the slain senator who we all remember. I'm an older person, so I remember where I was when his uncle got shot and when he got shot. And here he is, a Kennedy Democrat, endorsing Donald Trump because it's about, stopping censorship. And he was somebody who didn't have Secret Service protection when he was running for president. And they wouldn't give it to him until by the grace of God, President Trump survived because an assassin's bullet, but he didn't have enough security protection. And this is what Biden and Harris are about. I mean, it's like
And
censorship.
Robert F.
not-
Kennedy Jr. used the same line that Ronald Reagan used. I didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left me. I thought that was quite powerful.
Yeah, and he'll be a very important, if we win, he'll be a very important figure in the administration because he was talking about chronic, health diseases in the United States and how to get the country healthy again. And, the Democrats talk about it, but they don't that's why, they're going off calling us all these names about the rally, but they don't want to talk about the issues that were raised up. They don't want to talk about the fact that Donald Trump will be better on health care than Biden and Harris have been. And you had Tulsi Gabbard there, another Democrat who left her party because, she doesn't want to see the endless wars. She served in war. And she doesn't want to, she knows Donald Trump will keep us out of these wars. And, and you had Elon Musk there. Elon Musk, he's guaranteeing us free speech. At this point in time, 4 years ago, they censored Donald Trump about the Hunter Biden laptop, and that cost us the election.
Yeah, absolutely did. John McLaughlin, the greatest pollster in America. We'll talk to you next week, all throughout the week, when we get the results in. John, thanks for joining us today.
8 days to go, and just don't vote, but get your friends and family out to vote because it's really important. This is the most historic election we've ever seen in the United States in our lifetime. So,
absolutely. John, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You bet. Up next, Steve Cortez. I'm Michael Patrick Leahy.
Hey there, this is Lenny McGill, founder and CEO of The Glock Store. As a proud sponsor of this show, you may have heard Michael Patrick Leahy mention us a few times over the past 4 years. But today, it's me on the radio telling you how pleased we are to be associated with Michael Patrick Leahy and his dedication to the highest levels of professional journalism. Michael Patrick Leahy has been threatened with jail time in bringing the true facts about that Nashville Covenant shooting to his listening audience. Michael Patrick Leahy, you keep doing what you're doing, and we here at the Glock Store will keep sponsoring your show for the good of Nashville and the entire country. And I'm personally inviting all of your listeners to come visit and shoot at the Glock Store. It's where Michael Patrick Leahy learned to shoot a gun for the first time and where he bought his own personal Glock 19. I'm Lenny McGill, founder and CEO of the Glock Store here in Nashville, just minutes from the airports, worth the drive from anywhere, and a proud sponsor of Michael Patrick Leahy and the Tennessee Star Report.
Welcome back to the Michael Patrick Leahy Show. Now, here's Michael Patrick Leahy.
And welcome back to the Michael Patrick Leahy Show. We are joined on our Zoom Newsmaker line, we think, by a very good friend, Steve Cortez. Steve, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, great to have you on. Okay, so you and 33 million other people watched this interview that Joe Rogan had, 3-hour interview with Donald Trump. A very significant interview. I had never. Right. Did you know who Joe Rogan was?
Oh yes, yeah. Well, I love fighting and boxing, so I've known him for many years.
Really?
But I'm older than his target audience, so you're not. It's not misplaced to ask me if I know who he is. He's generally very popular with young folks and particularly young men. So middle-aged guys like me are not generally his audience. But again, I love the fighting sports. I love boxing. I like MMA. So I paid attention to him because of that, part of his life for quite a long time.
So Joe actually. He got his start. I didn't know that. There's a great show, 95 to 99, on NBC, I think it was called, News Radio. I loved it. And the late Phil Hartman was on it, and Maura Tierney was on it, several others. It was a really good show. And that was his first appearance. He played the electrician with kind of an angle or an attitude, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that he'd been an actor before.
Okay. Well, and really, it's interesting. He and Donald Trump have a long history, largely because of UFC and the sport of MMA. So in its early days, he became an announcer for them back when it was nothing, and they literally couldn't even pay him in the earliest days of the sports. MMA also couldn't get sanctioned and wasn't allowed to be held at very many venues. Trump said, hey, I love this sport. This is going to be popular, as is often the case. President Trump was very prescient as then private citizen. Donald Trump said, hey, I want these events at Trump resorts and at Trump casinos, and started hosting them. So they've had a long, long partnership. It's one of the reasons why Dana White, of course, the head of UFC, is so tight with Donald Trump, and to a lesser degree, Joe Rogan. I do think it's important to point out, though, too, believe me, Joe Rogan is not MAGA. So if we sat down with him, Michael, we would disagree on a heck of a lot, particularly when it comes to social policy. So he is not a right-winger. Now, I would describe him as sort of an old-school liberal. There aren't very many of them around, sort of an old-school Democrat. But this is somebody, he's sensible, he's thoughtful, he's provocative and interesting, but by no means is he a right-wing podcaster, as corporate media, I think, wants to, they want to put him in that silo.
I thought it was a fascinating interview. I mean, it was 3 hours, and it revealed a lot about Donald Trump, I thought, in a very interesting way and a very good way. But let's talk about who he reaches, who watches. I mean, Joe Rogan, didn't he sign a podcast deal with Spotify where he got $100 million for 3 or 4 years?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's how popular he is, though. And so, even outside of Donald Trump, his numbers are regularly in the tens of millions. I mean, he's a network effectively on his own. And by the way, those are for 3-hour shows, largely talking about really heady intellectual topics. I mean, sometimes he has sort of silly and fun shows, and it's all just sort of sports and frivolity. But for the most part, he's really diving into some big topics, and he does so, I think, in a great way. What I love about Joe Rogan, unlike most interviewers, certainly in the corporate media, is that, Michael, he is genuinely curious. I mean, there's a curiosity about him that's very genuine and very attractive. And so you are learning alongside him, and he knows a heck of a lot. He knows a lot about a lot of subjects, from sports to science to health to politics. But he's also willing to admit that he's not an expert in all of these areas, who could be, but he brings on experts and picks their brains. He does it in a conversational way, and he could be confrontational at times, but without seeming that he's being aggressive. So he's, I think, the best interviewer out there. I really do. So it's not surprising to me that he has the audience he does. And in terms of, who is that audience? It's largely young people. So I'm old. I'm at the upper end. I'm 52 years old. I'm sure I'm at the upper end of his audience. It tends to be young. It tends to skew male. By the way, President Trump is doing amazingly well with that group. Now, the challenge we have with that group is they don't necessarily tend to vote young men. So we won them over in terms of persuasion. We've won their hearts and minds. But can we get them to the polls? Have they already early voted? Can we convince them to do so this week? If not, can we get them there on election day? That's the challenge with this group. I think as far philosophically, we've already won a lot of these young men over. And by the way, one of the reasons, if I can state this, and I've got a teenage boy, and I think anybody who has boys in their teens or 20s will probably agree with this. These boys, these Gen Z young men, have been told for so long that their masculinity is a problem that they are revolting against it. Thank goodness, right? They have said, you know what? I've heard about enough of this. I've heard about enough of that. I'm guilty of having male private parts, and I'm guilty of being a young man or a boy. And they've had it. And I think Joe Rogan is part of that rebellion. It's part of that very proper counter movement against that femininity and that feminized instruction that so many men and young men have been subjected to in society. So I think there's something much bigger going on here than just this election, but this election's part of it.
Yeah, and that's a change since you and I were growing up. Basically, a guy was a guy, right?
Right.
And there was none of this, you're terrible because you're a guy stuff.
Right.
I can't imagine what it's like being a young guy growing up now. And so you can see why Joe Rogan would be popular with that group. You're right about the interview style, because I'd never watched a Joe Rogan interview ever. It was very good. He asked some really good questions, and he was also good in this sense. Donald Trump kind of went off in a certain. Donald Trump can kind of go on a tangent at times, right? And so he started to go off a little bit, and he said, "I heard all that. Now tell me this." I thought it was good. And Trump just kind of rolled with it. He said, okay. But I thought it was an excellent, revealing interview. And of course, the thing, I played the clip earlier. The thing that really caught my attention, Trump being Trump, when they were talking about, all of these windmill energy sources out in the water, out in the ocean. And he said, well, it's hurting the whales. And Trump said, yeah, I want to be a whale psychiatrist.
Right.
That was hilarious.
Yes. It's vintage Trump. He showed that he's funny. He showed, by the way, too, that he can be self-deprecating, which is something that the corporate media would never admit. I mean, he even made light of, and it's obviously not a light subject. He made light of the wound to his ear from the assassination attempt from him when he was shot in the head and nearly killed. So, whether it's something sort of silly like, oh, I should be a whale psychologist, or something that's slightly more serious, he was still willing to poke fun and make light of himself. At the same time, I think President Trump, like Joe Rogan, showed his tremendous range, because he can talk ultimate fighting with Joe Rogan and be in the conversation. At the same time, talked about the history of the White House, the history of President Lincoln, the effectiveness of nuclear power, what he would do in Ukraine. I mean, it really was, and over 3 hours, by the way. I mean, and think about the contrast. I think that's what's most important. The fact that, number one, Kamala said no to this interview, not surprisingly. And why? Well, because she would not have the intelligence, nor the stamina, nor the eloquence to last for 3 hours in that environment where you were intellectually being put to the test. And again, in a friendly and conversational way, but nonetheless being put to the test. And I think you saw there the character and the mind of Donald Trump for 3 hours. You also saw the stamina, the physical and mental stamina of this man who belies his chronological age. And that, I think, also is very important. So just on many levels, I think this was a home run. You mentioned it's got 33 million views right now and counting. That's just on YouTube. We don't know how many views on Spotify and Apple. We know it's the #1 podcast, but Apple doesn't release real-time data. They just tell you how it ranks. So it's far and away the #1 podcast. I think it's very safe to say this is going to go well north of 50 million. The all-time record for a Rogan podcast is 68 million total views with Elon Musk. It may very well break that record, in fact. And listen, it could in a very tight presidential race, and I continue to poll this, and I continue to get super tight numbers that look good for Trump, but tight. In a tight race, a podcast with that kind of reach, a network, which is Joe Rogan, he's not just a host, he's a network, where Trump performed incredibly well, that might tip the balance, Michael. It really might.
I noticed this about Rogan, and I had the same reaction to you. The guy's a really good interviewer because he is curious.
Yeah.
But he said, "Look, I'm happy to have Kamala Harris in for a conversation.
Right.
I'm not going to try to do gotchas. Just want to have a conversation with her." So from Rogan's perspective, he's still leaving it open. Has the Kamala Harris campaign officially said, "No, I'm not coming on Joe Rogan"?
Yeah, and they claimed it was scheduling problems, which is obviously not the case, right? It's not scheduling problems. With his reach, if they thought they could do well, they would be there, right? That's clear. I mean, it would be, she doesn't fly around. She doesn't wait at the airport the way you and I do for a flight, okay? She's on Air Force Two. She could be to Austin where his studios are, do the interview, and be out of there in a matter of hours. There's a reason she's not. By the way, look, if I were one of her staffers, I would say absolutely not. You are not going to Joe Rogan. Not because he's going to skewer her. He wouldn't. I believe. I take him at his word. If you watch his interviews, and again, I watched a lot of them over the years. If you watch his interviews, he doesn't do that. Even when he disagrees with somebody, he's very friendly and confrontational, conversational.
He's conversational. That's it. He's curious. He's friendly. He's conversational.
Yeah.
And he's not a gotcha guy in that
No.
sense, but he'll press on the issue.
Correct.
See, I would, by the way, the Harris campaign is not asking me for advice, right?
Yeah.
They probably should have, because I would have, at
Well,
least
true.
just from a practical point of view, I would have said, that Al Smith dinner, you really ought to go there. Not that I want to help her at all.
Right.
But, I would actually say, look, she's increasingly, she has a likability problem. She has a likability problem, and she has basically a policy problem because nobody knows what she stands for.
Right.
She would be better off going and talking to Joe Rogan for 3 hours just to do it, right? But I think
Michael, I rarely disagree with you. I'm going to disagree. If I were her staffer, I would say, but here's why. It's because of how cynically I view Kamala Harris.
Right.
No, I think if she went there and revealed herself for 2 or 3 hours, I think she would be even less likable than she already is.
That's hard. That's kind of hard to get.
Right. I know. But honestly, I think that, it's one thing to speak in this ridiculous, garbled syntax of platitudes and nonsense, right? Which is her default.
Ooh, I like
it's
that.
One thing
Can I take that phrase? That's
of course
very
you
good.
can. Of course you can. It's one thing for her to do that for a few minutes. All right, that's
Right.
bad enough. It's cringe enough. For her to try to do that for a couple of hours, for 2 or 3 hours with Joe Rogan in front of tens of millions of people who would see it, I think would do her far more harm than good. So no, I think her staff is doing her actually
and it's
solid.
Steve, it's kind of a moot point, right?
Yeah,
She's
right.
not going to
She's
do
not
it
doing
anyways,
it.
right?
Correct.
Last question. We got about 1 minute here, Steve. Is there anything that she could do to right the messaging ship?
At this point, no. I really don't think there's anything she can do.
I agree.
If I were advising her, I'd say talk nothing but abortion. You can't win this with any positive Kamala aspect. The only hope she has is that women are so ticked off about Dobbs that she could somehow thread the needle and pull it out. If I were, and of course I'm completely pro-life, by the way. I'm just saying, if I were on her team, God
Steve
forbid.
Cortez, where do people find you?
At Cortez Steve. Cortez with an S on the Twitter, please.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for joining us today.
You bet.
Insightful, as always. Well, more when we get back. I'm Michael Patrick Leahy.
My fellow Americans, I was this close, very close, to buying from the lumber yards. These are sick people. But I turned my head at the last second, and I saw a big, beautiful ad for D.T. McCall's. These are highly respected people. If I had not turned my head at the last second, I would have been ripped off at some lumber yard for $200 in hidden charges, and D.T. McCall and Sons are never going to do that. They'd never do that to you. These are great people. I've known them for a long time. They have great deals, and I just have to say, nobody knows deals like I do. D.T. McCall & Sons has locations in Lebanon, Carthage, Lafayette, Cookeville, and Franklin, and they have been family-owned in Middle Tennessee for over 100 years. These are tremendous people. D.T. McCall & Sons. Check out one of their stores today.
Impersonator not endorsed by Donald Trump.
Welcome back to the Michael Patrick Leahy Show. Now, here's Michael Patrick Leahy.
And welcome back. So the closing argument for the Democrats against Donald Trump is Hitler, Trump is a fascist, and all of his billionaires are bad people that are backing him. Really? Joe Biden made that case, and I want to talk about that and the reality of what the people backing Donald Trump support. Here we go. Clip 21. Joe Biden attacks Elon Musk.
He has literally spoken out and said he's opposed to. And his new the wealthiest man in the world, now his ally, right? Well, that wealthiest man in the world turned out to be a legal worker here when he was here. Oh, I'm serious. He was supposed to be in school when he came on a student visa. He wasn't in school. He was violating the law. And he's talking about all these illegals coming our way.
Okay, Joe Biden's lying there. I checked it out, and it's not true at all. Elon Musk was never illegal working here. Never. Also, you can see the guns are out, the knives are out for Elon. The district attorney in Philadelphia is suing him for this $1 million prize that's being given to people who signed the petition to support the First Amendment and Second Amendment. They're claiming that it's violating the lottery and consumer fraud law in Pennsylvania. But note who is bringing the case. It's not the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania, who actually is a knowledgeable attorney. It is instead the district attorney in Philadelphia, who is, wait for it, a George Soros district attorney. This negativity against a big Donald Trump supporter, Elon Musk, who I like because when he bought Twitter and turned it into X, it became really the place of free speech in America. And, we had our news outlet, the Star News Network, TennesseeStar.com, had very little opportunity to get our stories out through Facebook and Google because we were throttled. And when Elon Musk came back with X and Twitter, our news traffic skyrocketed. Thank you, Elon. Also, what is Elon doing? He's like putting the technology and engineering and American can-do spirit back. And nothing is more indicative of that than this beautiful booster rocket landing that he brought in that we all saw. It's just like spectacular. He embodies the American can-do spirit. I have a clip here to illustrate that. Let's go with clip 22. Musk on a future world that's very positive.
I meet many people who think that there are too many humans on Earth, but this is not true. There aren't enough humans on Earth. In fact, you can fit all the humans on Earth in the city of New York on one floor. Okay, so, or like if you fly across the country and you look down and say, if you had to drop a ball on someone's head, would you succeed? And you would not, because the density of people is very low. There are actually very few people on Earth. It's only if you live in a very dense city environment that it seems that there are many people, that Earth is densely populated. But it is only densely populated in like 0.1% of the surface area.
So that was Elon Musk at one of his Pennsylvania rallies, not yesterday at the Madison Square Garden. But I bring that up because what he said later in the Madison Square Garden event was to talk about the positive energy of America. Also, I mean, Elon Musk says, we're going to go to Mars. I'm going to have a rocket that goes to Mars in 2 years. And then if that succeeds, we're going to put people in Mars in another 2 years. This is so... Now, I'm not all that... It's not a big priority for me to go to Mars. But on the other hand, look at what that says. It says about, expanding the frontiers. Musk apparently, sort of like, Star Trek, go out and explore the universe. It's that kind of positive thing that Elon Musk does. And look, he's fascinated by it. He wants to do it. He can do it. I think it's great. It's about American positivity. It's the American can-do attitude. That's the difference between Elon Musk, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and all of this Biden, negativity, the Harris thing. They're not the kind of people that are going to create something great. They're the people that are going to preside over the demise of America with rules and regulations. Well, to heck with that. I could use a little bit stronger language here, but I don't want to get that FCC fine. But the point is, look, are we men or are we mice? That's an old saying from a crazy cartoon. But look, that's America. America is a can-do place. America is filled with positive energy. Now, it's been cut short since the Obama years. It's been cut short by the rise of the deep state. But guess what? In 8 days, when Donald Trump is elected president again, if you go out and you vote, if you go out and you have your friends vote, and if you have your family vote for Donald Trump, we're going to see a resurgence of America that you've never seen before. And not a day too late. We'll have more after this. Crom Carmichael joins us in the Tennessee Bonus Hour. I'm Michael Patrick Leahy.